Oh, this is the big myth. Like this, the thought process of, hey, if I put springs around it, it's called a trampoline. There's so many things wrong with that, and one of them being the springs. Like there's so much to it. Like, yeah, so like Armand's got, that'd be a pro Olympic grade trampoline spring and a really crappy overseas spring. And you can see what happens to them in rather short order. So
This was on a backyard trampoline that we bought.
Trampoline, yeah.
Playpen.
Yeah.
I would play playpen.
I wouldn't do that with my kids. I wouldn't put them in that thing. So, I mean, this thing's got merit to it. Like from the shape and everything, like we can tell. And the tapers are nice. Like those protect it from some of the impact loading. But it, like you can tell, this is a good spring that's been made on a CNC machine. Unfortunately, we know from the overseas manufacturing that they put cheap materials into these. So you can't tell. It looks like wire, but that's why it's failing like this. There's a few more things to the inherent design, how skinny it is. Like Armand holding up that trampoline spring before, like you can tell how much skinnier it is. That just can't handle the abuse.
No, that's actually a dirty trick. They do that to get, to build durability in. It's a very tight coil spring. That coil really wants to resist opening because it's such tight coils. So it's going to hold up to more weight, and it's going to try and save it until Uncle Jerry comes over, 270 pounds, and overstretches it.
But it's still a trade-off because, like, you get a little kid jumping on that thing.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to move it. Like
that's how far this stretched, and she's toast.
Well, that trampoline is going to be like, they jumped. Like, there's going to be no real bounce to it. It's going to be tough, jarring, shallow. It's not going to give you that deep, lofty bounce you want in a high-performance trampoline.
When it's very tight, jarring, like you said, you'll feel this in your lower back as an adult, and your kids, they won't get anything out of it. It's very tight. You stretch this an inch. I think we had the same amount of preload or same amount of force to stretch this an inch as you'll get 3 or 4 inches out of something like this. This is where you're going to get your bounce.
Well, and that's where you see those high-performance trampolines, them segging really far down into the trampoline. You see the big swoop in the jump surface, massive stretch. That's where you get performance from, not these little dinky things that fit in a box real nice and come from overseas.
You guys mentioned tapered ends on those springs. What exactly does that mean, and how does that affect your bounce?
Part of it is just to protect the spring.
There's a lot that gets into it. I don't know if we want to get into it publicly. There's a lot of proprietary knowledge within the trampoline industry from kind of the pinnacle of performance. But basically, a cheap, easy spring is going to have no tapers on it. And that's one of the early red flags for just a really poor product.
This was realized 30 years ago. People that know trampolines don't make springs this way anymore. This one was made very recently.
Still by the same guys that haven't clued in because they still think a trampoline is a trampoline if it's got springs around it. So we got this fancy spring tester in front of us. We had this custom made, and what it lets us do is move in small increments. So as I turn this dial here,
my buddy Jared, actually, quick shout out.
What I'm going to do is turn this, and it allows us to see exactly how far it's moved and how much tension it's under. So it lets us analyze and determine what these springs are. So I'm going to put this in here, zero this out. So we are just going to see how this one's doing. 34.
He's increasing it by 1 inch increments. So it's now got 4 inches of stretch on the spring. 5.
This
6. This was a 5-inch spring to begin with.
But this has got about 90 pounds of force on it.
Springs generally don't snap. They generally just overextend, and then they turn into this. They've gone past their point of no return, and now you've permanently deformed them, and they don't work well at all anymore.
So this is actually a decently made domestic spring that's rather short. So it's now at its failure point. I can watch it going down right now. So I know this spring is actually toast. It may still function, but it's significantly lost some of its performance at this level. So this one isn't the best example. Unfortunately, all of our other springs never really lasted through the point of getting ready for this video, but we'll bring this back. Oh, there you go. So she's toast. So you see how the coils are left open here? That's the sign of a spring that's toast. Now, if I put this back in,
that only made it 8 inches of so it was done. 8 inches of preload, that thing is well overdone.
Yeah.
It started off as a 5-inch spring.
So formerly, if I would have set this up the first time around and stretched it to this point, we'd see a significant amount of force on this spring. Right now, we got next to nothing.
3 inches, yeah.
So I'll stretch this thing back out, and it's losing tension. So it does not like being stretched that far. That's one of the problems with these short little springs that we get. They're very, very stiff. They can't handle the stretch, and the stretch is what you need for that performance in these things. So what I was trying to do there is stretch out enough so it starts flopping. What we can do is use this spring to amplify. So this is a longer spring, still a low quality spring. This is actually for a commercial trampoline park. But if I give this a flick, you see how it's basically like a limp noodle piece of spaghetti here? That's the sign of a spring that's now toast. Now, if we compare that to this spring here, which is actually a super trampoline spring, it's got that nice snap to it. That's what you want. That's the sign of a good spring. It's got lots of life in it versus nothing. You can oftentimes just spread them out if worst comes to worst need be while you're waiting for new ones to come in. And as you start seeing them, you just swap them out as they go. In their little treasure box here, we might have some that are partially broken.
What happens though is if you got one failed spring, that spring is no longer doing the work it was meant to do. When you're jumping on it, you're now subjecting the adjacent springs to a lot more load. And there's now one less spring helping carry it. So you're going to be much more likely to start damaging adjacent springs as you go. So if you wreck one, it's better to fix it now than leave it go, because you're just going to end up wrecking more springs around it.
So here we're seeing signs of impact damage. So you see where this spring's got a small little gap here. That's from impact damage on the spring. So although most of the coils are tightly bound together, that little gap is a sign that this spring has been permanently damaged. So it'll still function. If I throw this in here, box here, wind this up. I'm going to test this up against my cue card. So I basically documented how this spring is supposed to track from the factory. I'm going to zero this out. And yeah, so it's already lost a significant amount of its force based on what this card is saying. And so that's all from the spring getting overstretched. As soon as the spring's getting overstretched, it starts losing its memory and its ability to respond and pull back closed.
Yeah, so when it was originally tested, it would have been a good brand new out-of-the-box spring, tested it, 1 inch stretch, 2 inch stretch, 3 inch stretch, and to the point of failure, and then now we go back to retest 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch. We're seeing way less tension at those numbers relative to before it was overstretched.
Do we test a fun one?
Yeah, just a fun one. This isn't even the most fun one we have. We have a funner one.
More fun.
That's probably the 10 inch music wire that we use. I thought I brought an 11 inch as well.
So this one's made out of music wire. So this is a totally different type of wire. You can't tell by the naked eye. If you had a material spec report on this steel, you'd be able to tell that this has got a much higher carbon content. It's a much better steel. So your foundation you're starting with is much better. Now the benefit to that, stable. So this spring has been extended now 13 inches, and the force being exerted on that spring is just rock solid. So it's not going anywhere. That means this thing can hang out, and it's not getting damaged. It's not breaking the point of elasticity on this spring. 15 inches, still stable. Very rare occurrences, these springs can break here because they're tempered steel. So we're just going to back up a little bit. Again, it's very rare, but possible.
I'm confident.
We're just going to ignore the 65-inch TV that's right beside this as well. So we are still at 21 inches extended now. So we've put 21 inches of load on this spring, and it's rock solid. So can you imagine if you were jumping on a trampoline and the spring was moving that far? Totally unheard of in a big box store trampoline. You were very brave putting your fingers. And that's some of the benefit to using just high quality materials. So this is where not all springs are equal. Most springs would not be able to handle that amount of stretch. Pull this out of there. So now if I go and test this again, got a nice snap to it. So ready to go, ready to perform another day. This is the difference between something like one of our alpha trampolines and a performance gymnastics trampoline and the typical stuff you see in a big box store or the typical stuff you see manufactured overseas?
You'll see that on a Crazy Tune.
Nothing. So that's the difference in a good quality trampoline spring. That's what you typically see in an Olympic level trampoline, pro level trampoline. We got some more here. Like this is actually a commercial trampoline park spring. So this is, I wouldn't say it's one of the best trampolines. Like at our parks, we kind of overdo it just because we can. We value stuff being really high quality. So we would run a spring like this in our trampoline parks. This is kind of
music wire.
Music wire. So again, really good steel, lasts a very long time, a ton of cycles. You can abuse this stuff and you don't have to change them.
So a couple other aspects there. You'll notice again, this is our standard trampoline park spring we put in our own Apex parks. Wider coil, that gives you a softer bounce. It's more forgiving. You mess up, you land on something on the trampoline. This is going to provide a more forgiving impact attenuation surface, all that kind of stuff. Tighter spring, they can get away without using music wire because it's a tighter coil. It takes a lot more tension to open it up and subject it to those lengths and that stretch that's going to abuse it and wreck it. But you're doing so at a much firmer, more jarring bounce.
So people do this, it's cheaper. Much cheaper to make a small diameter coil spring than the larger coil. You use way more wire making that coil, that spring, and it takes up more volume. Like if you want to pack as many trampolines as you can into a shipping container, you get less trampolines in there by using a high quality spring. So these are still decent. I'm going to throw this in here. You're still going to stretch this one a few inches and it's going to handle it just fine. Just not nearly like that 9-inch music wire spring over there. So you see that closed up just fine.
I guess it's just something subjective here, or sorry, objective. How much force does it take to run this thing open 4 inches? How much does it take to run this thing open 4 inches?
Yeah, so you're going to see way more. And that's that jarring bounce that we were describing earlier. Like, it's not going to be fun. You're not going to enjoy jumping on the trampoline, especially if you're younger. Younger, smaller children have a lot less fun on this compared to that. So by using the music wire, the higher grade materials, now not only is it fun for kids, fun for adults. And they can handle that abuse from just a heavier weight user.
Oh, I want to tear the cross tramp, all that. Don't cross your springs. It's so dumb.
Just why not? I want to drive around with my e-brake on. That sounds like a fantastic idea.
That's probably a topic for another podcast. But just if you do it, sorry, there's a better way. You were misinformed by someone who didn't know anything better.
Basically, what people are trying to do is to tighten up their trampoline, make it feel more responsive. By stretching the spring further, you're tightening up your trampoline. Problem is you're introducing friction. So yeah, people will try and increase the preload by stretching the spring further.
It's a better way. You can get the benefit of the more stretch, more preload without all that friction, all that wasted energy in the springs chafing and grinding against each other. And they won't wear out and then rust in 6 months as well. And they won't sound terrible. Like we appropriately size the jump surface. Like we balance, we tune the trampoline. We develop it for the end user. What do they want? So.
Well, yeah. Well, like even if you try and match a new jump surface on an old trampoline, like you need to set it up properly with the right spring length for the spring and for the jump surface. Like it all needs to be factored in addition to how high the trampoline is off the ground. Like we're showing these crazy examples where you take a pro level trampoline spring. You would never want to put this on a cheap overseas trampoline because you just bottom out and then you hit the ground and you're not having a good day at that point. We see people do things like dig holes in the ground in the middle of the trampoline. There's all kinds of things you can do, but you need to know what you're doing when you're messing with that level of performance.
True, and the spring isn't the first thing you touch. Like the frame is your foundation. If you put a crazy spring on a frame that's just like if it flexes, if the frame is flexing when you're jumping, that's again another example where energy is lost. Much like the friction, if that frame has to flex, you have to literally contort all that steel. You're using your energy to do that. You're putting your energy into the surface. It's doing all of that before it actually returns you up into the air. So you're wasting it. So
like the trampolines are not things with springs around the edges. They're energy storage devices. Like Armand saying, you need efficient flow of energy. Energy in, energy out. Your loss is what a cheap trampoline is. Your lack of loss is what a pro trampoline is. So you get what you pay for.
We should do a topic on all the different aspects of your trampoline. You can touch and isolate all the different variables to maximize the efficiency of your every bounce. Energy in versus energy out.
In a podcast coming to you soon.
Yes.
the first question we always get asked when someone's looking at buying a good quality trampoline is, why am I going to spend that much more money? To be honest, like, I won't even say that. You're going to compare something like this to something like this. So this is a lot less metal. It's not going to hold up. You don't have as much quality. This is more metal, more substance. You're getting what you pay for. This is an entry-level spring. So if you use an entry-level domestic spring, a good one, this is what you get. If you buy overseas, this is what you're going to get. So from foundationally, yeah, you're going to spend 30% more, 40% more to get a good quality trampoline. You get a good quality foundation. So we have 2 versions of 9-inch spring that we carry within all of our companies. And like this one right now is actually music wire. We make a regular steel wire as well. It's the exact same size, exact same shape, just a little bit different as standard offering of wire. And that's the foundation. So if you're exiting the conversation of budget and you're saying, hey, I value the performance and the use of the product a little bit more, well, then we start looking at different tuning options, because you basically want a soft spring to be able to make it fun for users like small children, but also good for adults. Now, the problem is, if we gave you a really soft spring with a really cheap wire, it would work for kids and it wouldn't work for adults. And that's when you start wrecking stuff. That's what some of the overseas guys try and do. They try and make a really soft spring. This one's really tough, but they could try and make one bigger. We've seen it before. You throw a few adults on the trampoline, or one adult on the trampoline really knows what they're doing, and the spring fails right away. So it's one of those, you get what you pay for. And if you're not buying from a trustworthy source, you might not be getting what you think you're getting.
I think that pretty much sums up this podcast. We'll see you guys soon on episode 3.
Spring size matters.